I've always wanted to get to the point where I'm like, I launched you. You were independent, but I was so focused on what I was doing right then in that moment because I have 5, you have 6 children. So I feel like it kind of crept up on me.
All right, welcome back to LO Mama. We are so happy you're here. We hope you're having a great day. And if it's not great, we hope this makes it even better.
Yeah, this has been so sweet. Like we're now like 3 in.
Yes.
And we're just so grateful for everyone who's coming on this journey with us. And wherever you are, I just hope it feels like we are with you. We are cheering you on. We're on your team. And most of all, like God is for you. And we just want to talk about something a little bit, keep it real style.
Yeah.
We want to talk about a phase of life that we're in right now, which is parenting adult children. And what else comes with that?
And having in-laws, like we have welcome daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws now into our family. And also just kind of that new phase of life that we all transition into where we're like parenting and we're in the like day-to-day, every single aspect of it. I remember when our kids just like went from like, I could just say, go brush your teeth and put on your pajamas and they could all do it by themselves. I was like, it's a new phase of life. I arrived, you know?
Yes.
But whenever your kids become adults, it's a new phase of life. And in some ways, there's like beauty in that and fun and excitement in that. But also there's things you miss about, you know, whenever you had your kids, whenever they were all under your roof.
Yeah.
And so it's a transition in your life. So I saw a lot of questions about that. A lot of questions about how do you, you know, parent adult children? How do you welcome new people into your family? And how do you just like deal with that transition?
Yeah. And perhaps that identity issue of who am I now?
Yeah.
Like you don't mean to make that your whole identity, but it's a very abrupt end when you get to that last child leaving home. It can creep up on you.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I feel like I maybe didn't appreciate when they were younger. I was so in it that I wasn't thinking this is evolving and this season will be ending.
Yeah.
And I don't have a problem with it ending. And I don't mean that in any unhealthy way. I've always wanted to get to the point where I'm like, I launched you. You were independent. But I was so focused on what I was doing right then in that moment because I have 5, you have 6 children. So I feel like it kind of crept up on me. And I don't know what it was like for you. So maybe we can start here. But when our kids were young, so I've got 5, and our daughter, our firstborn, was the only one that kind of made it to term. So she was 37 weeks, which is still early.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is early.
But from then on out, we then had 4 boys over the next kind of 7 years, I think, 7, 8 years. And they were all premature. And so kind of ranging from like 34 to 36 weeks. And so by the time I had the last couple, or I was having the last couple, they would make me have these steroid shots. They were like, we think we know what's going to happen here. There's a pattern. And every time I had one of those boys, they left and they had to leave the room and go straight to the NICU. And that feeling, unless it's happened to you, it's like something has been ripped out from you and everything in you that's natural to protect and nurture, and you don't get to do it. You're so powerless, and this child is not with you, and there's that empty space. And so I walked through that 4 times, and that is the only feeling that I can liken it to. Like I wanted my kids. I'm like, go live your life, be independent. But when it happened, that is exactly, it took me back to being in the hospital and my baby was somewhere I couldn't reach them, where I couldn't hold them. And everything in me, it felt total pain. I'm like, did I do something wrong? Is this something unhealthy? But I think it can just be a really painful moment. And maybe you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, when I dropped my kid at college, that empty feeling, it was there, or that ripped feeling. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It means that something has abruptly come to an end. Yeah. It was a part of who you were. And so we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit too.
So good. I didn't know that about you. So I'm learning things along with all of you. I'm learning things about your story, and I love that. And that did not, all of mine were, actually Sadie was like a week late, and I remember being like, cannot wait to get this baby out of me. So I did not have that experience, but I definitely can relate because of whenever we send our kids off and send them off to college, that feeling of like, I think it's such a mixed, I remember just having that such mixed emotions of like, you're so excited for them because you know like they're going off on their adventure, and you know what that looks like and that feels like, and you want that for them, and you know this is right, this is the way it's supposed to be. But also that like that little bit of like a hole, you're like, oh, you know, I'm gonna miss that. And for our home, we have 6 kids, and so our home was always like busy and full. And whenever you just don't have that laughter or that voice in your house anymore because that one child is missing because they've moved on, they're into a different phase of life, it can leave a little bit of a hole. And so how do we kind of walk through that well, I think is something that all moms are like, you know, want to know. And I saw a lot of those questions, so that's good.
Yeah, that's right. And you might be listening right now and you're like, no, I'm the one that's leaving and I'm watching my mom freak out or I'm freaking out, like I'm overwhelmed. So it doesn't have to just be that the parent is struggling. It can be that that's really painful and scary for the person who's about to leave. So often it's harder to be the one driving away. And so, yeah, we kind of want to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, before we dig in, one thing that we, as part of like our relationship, is we always love to hear what each other is like reading about, what we're learning, what we're like listening to. So is there anything that you're reading that kind of relates to this right now maybe, or that you're listening to that kind of goes along with what we're talking about?
Well, I'll start off with what I'm listening to.
Okay.
This song, I think we talked about this last episode, but I have a problem with having to play a song on repeat. Like if it's speaking to me, that song is going to be on for many days. And right now, Kirk Franklin's Brighter Day, I
love him.
Get this song off my mind. It like creates an atmosphere. And there are some things that, if I'm honest, you know that scripture of like, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And there's been some things that I'm believing for. And we are invited in scripture. And I actually want to talk about this later in James, you know, to ask God where we're lacking wisdom, to ask God, to ask him big. But if you doubt, then you're basically considered a double-minded person. And I have felt there are some things, look, I have been chasing after these things for years. These are not new requests. And there's been pain in that. And I have felt like, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief because it's been so long. And this song has literally been an atmosphere changer. And I don't know, like, I feel like we've never danced together.
We haven't.
Maybe we should do it tonight on the kitchen table.
There was like line dancing at this one thing we were at. Did you were not there?
I was more of I feel like I was watching that because it was all too fast for me. I was like, I need just like a slow
I'll jump in on the line dancing.
No, I love dancing. That's like my thing. And so if you want to know what I'm doing, I'm in my kitchen dancing to this song and it's helped my faith.
Yeah.
Because it just reminds her like change is coming. Good things are coming. Is it based on me? No. Is it based on this person that I'm praying for? No, it's based on the mercy and the goodness and the faithfulness of God. And so I've had that song on repeat.
That's so good. I feel like Kirk Franklin is like, when you listen to him, it brings you joy and you watch him dance. It's like, it's fun and joyful. And I love that. That's a great one.
Yeah. And that was my childhood music. And sometimes I think it's really important to just go back and like meditate on the things that when you were like young and carefree. Almost like that first love stage of life too. That's been so beautiful. But what have you been listening to?
Okay, so what I've been listening to, well, this is like listening and reading.
Yeah, 100%.
So I've been listening to the book on tape, Younger Next Year, which just goes along with this theme. But you probably aren't there yet because it's like, I'm 50 now. So I need to prepare.
Yeah.
So my grandmother is 93 and she's amazing and still such a part of our life. She comes to our kids' like T-ball games and everything. And I'm like, I want to be that. Like when I'm 93, I want to be that. So I'm learning about how to, how to do that. And one of the things it's telling me is that I have to exercise 6 days a week. So I haven't really done that
That's
yet.
more of an idea.
But I do see that it's not like heavy exercise, but like just do something.
Move your body.
Which one of the things that, we try to do as a family is like play pickleball, get outside, do fun things. And because I'm kind of more like, when I exercise, I enjoy it. I like it. It's just becomes that thing that is kind of on the back burner. So whenever it's fun and whenever I can like do it with friends or family, then it makes me much more likely to do it. So it's kind of like for those of you who are, in the phase of life that I'm in, I think it's a really good one. It's encouraging and, It's one of those just really practical books
Yes.
of how do we stay young and we're going to be there for our grandkids and are going to be able to jump on the trampoline. I actually did a backflip on the trampoline the other day. So I was pretty, yes.
You're so flexible. So I don't think I've still got it in me.
This is one of my things. Like every year I try to do a backflip on the trampoline and off the diving board just to like say like I've still got it. Well, the last couple of years I have not done it. And I just kind of was like, oh, maybe I passed that point. Well, nope. The other day I said, I'm going to try it and I can still do a backflip on the trampoline. So I'm going to keep that up.
I love that.
We'll see what year I like totally like stop, but maybe I'll make it to 60 still doing backflips. We'll see. No matter how you like to start your day, starting off on the right foot makes a big impact on the rest of your day. That's why King's Lane Coffee offers the freshest, best tasting coffee out there. King's Lane Coffee is roasted right here in West Monroe, Louisiana, and delivered right to your doorstep for peak freshness and flavor. Every batch is roasted with precision and passion, ensuring small batch quality in every cup. The house blend is available in both espresso and drip roast, so you can taste the difference that local roasting makes no matter how you enjoy your coffee. Sustainability and fair trade are so important in the coffee bean business, so King's Lane Coffee only imports beans sourced from reputable farms that prioritize quality and ethical practices. So I'm so excited about King's Lane. This is our coffee, our family's coffee. John Luke has been into coffee for years now. He's basically like a coffee sommelier, if that's a thing. If you've been to our warehouse at Duck Commander, you know that we're right here on King's Lane. So we thought, why not name our roaster King's Lane Coffee? And it's been so much fun. Our warehouse smells like amazing coffee every day. We all get the benefit of it right here at work. So I can't wait for you to try it. Visit kingslancoffeeroaster.com today for local small batch coffee delivered right to your door. When you use code MAMA at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your order. That's kingslancoffeeroaster.com, and be sure to use the promo code MAMA, M-A-M-A, at checkout to receive 10% off your order.
Well, I'm normally reading like super practical books because I think we talked about like we're both learners.
Yes.
So I'm just like, just tell me, and like because I want to do it better or I want to grow, and so I'm normally reading like something that's practical. I've been at this place where we're told just to pray continually. It's a pattern of life, and it doesn't have to be, you get up and you do it between 5 and 6 a.m. It's this constant conversation with God, and it can be range from everything, Thanksgiving, present your prayers and requests, with Thanksgiving, but lament also, and like the why, the how, the when, God, and all of that. And so that book has just been such a gift in my life to like even help me dig deeper into prayer, but not even in a way where I got to do more, but it's actually helped build my faith while I'm waiting.
There was something that you said earlier that I wanted to come back to because I remember a moment in my life where there was something I'd been praying for years, like 15 years, like a very long time. And I remember I was actually with a therapist. I had this great Christian, older woman who was a therapist that I was sitting in her office, and I just said, it was just a low point for me. And I said, this just feels hopeless. And it was such a gift because instead of being like, maybe it is hopeless, she was like, I want you to stop right now. And she just like stopped me in my tracks. She said, because when you say something is hopeless, you're denying God's power. And it was such a powerful thing to me because she's like, you serve a God of hope and he can do anything.
Oh, good,
he can do miracles. And it was just exactly what I needed to hear in the moment because like you said, there's some things that we're going to be praying for a long time. And at the age that we are, we can look back and be like, oh, I prayed for that for years. But that very thing that I had been praying about for that long and felt at that moment that it was hopeless is totally, God has answered that prayers in more ways than you can possibly imagine. And now I look back and I'm like, how did I ever think that was hopeless? Because God can do anything. And so as you were saying that, and I just want to encourage you guys, if there's things that you've been praying for, if you're, whatever stage of life you're in, know that like there is nothing that's hopeless, that God cannot, there's nothing that he cannot do.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying because there's this scripture in Luke 18, and this is Jesus talking, those words in red. Like he said them, they came out of his mouth straight from the heart of God. And it says this, Jesus told his disciples a parable. And here's the why behind the parable. It was to show them that they should always pray and never give up.
Mm.
And he goes on to tell this parable of the persistent widow. And, she didn't stand a chance against the judge. He was not interested in her. She was not on his radar. She's got no power, but she just did not stop asking. And I would encourage any of you to go look that up today. And if what Korie is saying resonates, like, go find that scripture for yourself and let God really encourage you. But the message I think that maybe needs to come through loud and clear is like, always pray, never give up.
Okay, let's segue into kind of like the topic of the day. So I actually was telling Bella that we were going to talk about this, and she said, you should tell about the way you just kind of like let us be and don't give expectations on us. And I was like, okay, tell me about that. So one of the things that I think when you have adult children is you really have to just like let them be and let them do their thing and and know that like they will come back if you create this space that's fun and they want to be at. But if you put pressure in or like, hey, I need you to be here at this time, I need you to do this, and guilt trip of like, why did you not do that? And so every year we've talked before about our holiday traditions, and we have a lot of them. It's, to be fair, there's a lot of them. And so I always send out like a text and I say, okay, we have this at this time, this at this time, at this time. But then I always put in there is like, be at the things you can and don't worry about the rest. If you're there, show up and be a part of it. But if you can't be there, that's okay. So I really try to just do that for our kids, is just like no expectations. Tonight we have dinner and Willie's going to cook. And so I text him like, hey, if you can show up. If you can't, you can't, because they're in a phase where they're living their lives and they're growing in their relationships with their spouse. Most of our kids are married. We have 5 of our 6 that are married now. So they're growing in their relationship with their spouse. So that really needs to be their priority right now. They have young children. That's their priority. And so just to kind of like let go of those expectations and allow your kids to be at what they can be at in your family and not worry about the rest, I think is something that we've tried to kind of do within our family. And when I told Bella, I was like, what should I tell about that? That was one thing that she said. And the gift of that is that they all want to be there. They all want to be there. Yeah.
I'm so thankful. Like you decided when they reached 18, that was how you transitioned, or was that when they got married? Like when did that moment happen? Because I don't feel like everyone holds their kids that lightly. And sometimes people are holding on out of fear.
Yeah.
Like, if we don't do this thing. And I remember we had this beautiful tradition on Christmas Eve, and we would always do this thing and go to this place. And one year, one of our kids was like, hey, I've got another plan. And I just remember being like, it's like falling out of a plane, being like, I have to be fine now. I have to be fine. I have not had any time to prepare for this disappointment, because there's this expectation that because it's a tradition, it's always going to be this way. And then you don't want someone to feel this is something they have to do.
Yeah.
This is something they get to do if they want to do it.
Yeah.
So like, I don't think that comes natural to everybody. So how did you arrive at that place? Do you just naturally run like relaxed?
I think I am kind of naturally relaxed. So I think that maybe that does come a little bit easier to me but also maybe because like I don't necessarily like expectations on myself either. So like I want to offer that to them to be good. Like, and I'm so thankful all of our kids have kind of moved back. They've gone away off to college or wherever they've gone and then come back. And that's been such a gift. But I always kind of didn't want to place that on them to feel like they had to,
Yeah.
But my mom is that. Like, she makes her house fun. And if you're there, you can show up and be there. And if you can't, you can't. And like you mentioned, traditions. I know there was one. So one of the things that we have always done as a family is, the day after Thanksgiving, we put up our tree and and it became like another holiday. It was like really fun. We decorated together. We all like put on Christmas pajamas and dress up crazy, and we play Christmas music. And that was the day after Thanksgiving, our tradition. But over the years, it had to change because our kids, got married and they have other traditions that go along with their in-laws and their families. And so we've had to shift that. And that's kind of like bounced around a little bit.
Yeah.
And we have this tradition where John Luke puts the star on the tree and we pass it down. Everyone like touches the star and pass it down. But so we've had to change that. And now we do that. We don't have a star on our tree till Christmas Eve or Christmas Day because we couldn't do it the day after Thanksgiving like we always did. So I think holding those things loosely it's not always easy because
Yeah.
like you said, you're like, oh, wait, but this is how we've always done it.
Yep.
But know that things change and offer that to your kids that it's okay. It's okay for things to change. One thing I've noticed in my kids and in their relationships, like in their friendships, whenever they start dating, and they start dating the one that they're going to marry, you can just see,
Yeah.
you can see it happen.
Yeah.
You know when it is, and it's like they have to invest in that relationship during that time period. So some of their friendships start to fall off because like this is the relationship that's going to be for the rest of their life. They have to spend that time. And the friends that can do that and can make it through that and can see like, oh, this is just for this time. They're going to come back to me as my friend.
Yes.
Then they maintain those friendships. But the ones that can't and are kind of like upset and angry. So I think that that's a little bit a part of how as moms you have to do like, no, like, okay, this is what they're doing. They're investing in this relationship and that's what they need to be doing.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be doing. And know that doesn't mean they love you any less. That doesn't mean that your relationship with them is any less important. It just means that this is the stage of life they're in and what is supposed to be happening right now. Yeah.
And it can be both. It can be like this healthy moment of releasing.
Yeah.
And it can also be hard and painful.
That's right.
It's not having to pretend that this is easy or comes natural, but it's about no one in any relationship ever wanted to feel controlled. Or like they had to be there. That's duty. You don't want anyone in our lives to feel like they have to be our friend, because that's just based on guilt and probably shame and all kinds of other healthy things. So I think it's a really important thing if maybe even you're listening and you're identifying like, I don't think I'm doing this well. Or like I say, I felt like I was falling out of a plane, but I was like, I have to immediately be okay with this because I am setting the tone for every other person that's not going to be able to be there. And so I was like, oh my gosh, of course. And I'm like, this is devastating.
Yeah.
But it was like, no, this is right. It's important that they spend this with their girlfriend's family or whatever, whatever's going on. So I think I love how you tell stories in such a real way, because it can be both. It can be the right thing to do, but it can also be really healthy.
Yeah.
Because, I'm getting ready to send our third child is going to New Zealand.
Wow.
So
that's like the other side of the world.
Like the other side of the world. And this was kind of my idea as well. So I'm like, what was I thinking? And we've only ever dropped kids off at college. So different state, same country.
Yes.
And so he's getting ready because he got to a time in his life. I think I was telling you this when we were just chatting, but he's our third, so middle child. And he was born. We had 3 kids in 3 years. And they kind of like vibe like triplets. And people don't know which one's what. They call them the wrong names the whole time. They wore matching clothes forever. I feel like that's a phase we have to give ourselves grace for.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
all did it. I don't know why. But he suddenly, when he was about 15, he's like, I want to be my own person. He suddenly felt so suffocated. And I was like, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Like that is you. You're a man of few words and you were telling me loud and clear,
Yeah.
like I'm feeling suffocated. And this thing that should feel safe and warm and home. It's like you're ready to launch and you're voicing that. So we kind of thought, what could we do that made him feel independent and his own person? And there was a youth camp in New Zealand and our friend was running it. So we're like, hey, can he come volunteer? And he loved it and he thrived. And they invited him to come back and do a gap year, do this leadership program, and he's going to play soccer out there. And so it's now approaching where we're preparing. This is happening. And so Maisie, our daughter, she turned to me and she's like, Mum, what if he meets someone in New Zealand? And so I could just see this moment of like this beautiful, healthy thing suddenly became very scary. But I love that what we're talking about is we want to create a place where once they're grown, they want to come back to that home.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I landed. I was like, look, if he goes and he meets someone, and this was my idea, then I believe that was the prompting of the Holy Spirit because his helpmate and her helpmate is on the way. And that is God's sovereignty at work. And I'm going to have to, God's maybe given me some time to get my head around this, but I want to always create a home, whether he's in New Zealand, wherever he is, when he comes home, it's like he walks through the door and nothing's changed. He's not treated like a child anymore. He's a man.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing when kids leave home, the build up is always worse.
Yeah.
And when they came home, it's like they never went.
Yeah. And you mentioned that earlier about like, does it just happen all at once? But I do think like as parents, if you're not in the phase of this yet, there are things that you can do to prepare for it. Like you need to let your kids have that freedom. I know that sometimes, this whole age of like helicopter parents or whatever, like you do as your kids grow up. And he voiced that. I remember Bella noticing it in her even more. Like as she entered middle school, like she needed kind of that independence. And she was always my little, like, I called her my little assistant. She was like my little right there under my arm, and then I noticed her needing that more independence and needing to just kind of be her own person and grow into that. So start noticing that in your kids and like, where can you give them that space to be that? We were, let our kids be pretty independent, pretty young. Sadie actually at 13 went to Austria. She got invited to play in like the Junior Olympics, and we sent her off at 13 to Austria by herself. And now that I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, she was just a baby.
Yeah.
But it was so good for her. I mean, it was like 10 days, and it was so good for her because she had always been in this environment where, mostly everyone's Christians, like she went to a Christian school, our church, like just our family. We live in a small town. And for her to have that gift to get to go away and kind of like come into her faith at 13 years old, that's kind of a critical time. But to come into her faith and see like, oh, not everyone thinks just like me. Not everyone was raised like I was, but to understand like, okay, is this faith going to be my own, or is it when I'm away, am I going to be like, oh, maybe that's not for me? And that was a time when she really grew in her faith, and it was so good for her. But looking back as a mom, I'm like, I can't believe I actually did that.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful that I did. Yeah. And so, all of our kids have had those. Summer camp, I think, is so good for them, and experiences when they could just, go and do their own thing, youth group, youth rallies, all of those kind of things, school trips, those kind of things where they're able to just exert their little independence a little bit rather than being there and smothering and being part of that.
Totally. And Maisie left home when she was 16.
Wow.
And so I remember at the time, like we were just transitioning to move to America for that first time there as a family. And she'd got into this unbelievable school and kind of had felt God speak to her about it. We'd felt like God speak to us about it. My husband had a dream about it.
Wow.
So there were so many things about this. You're like, everything about this feels like it's breaking the rules, but yet it feels like this is God's way for you. And I love that scripture, train up a child in the way they should go. And when they are old, they won't depart from it. And that was clearly the way she was meant to go. And I think sometimes those decisions, like to send them when they're 13 or 16, or you have to have the courage of your conviction.
Yeah.
What is right for one family might not be right for another.
Even for one child,
yes,
is not right for another.
Yes. Yeah.
My mom used to always say that like the fair only comes around once a year. Like not everything's fair. Like not because each of your kids are different, and it might look different for each child. Like how much freedom to give them or how much independence they need at different ages. So this isn't like a cookie cutter thing. It's more like you've got to know your kids and ultimately trust them to God, who's their heavenly Father.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking also about just that phase of kind of as moms going into a new phase of your life. And one thing that I think about is I read this book on happiness one time, and it talked about happiness. Your own happiness is a gift that you can give to others. And so that is a time where you're kind of like, you're responsible for your own happiness. Like you're responsible for it. And I think that sometimes as moms, we can put our happiness on our kids. And however, there's a saying like, you're only as happy as your most unhappy child, or we can that's really a burden we're placing on our children by putting that on them, or with our spouse. Sometimes you can put your happiness on your spouse. I'm only happy if you're happy. But as a mom, we actually are responsible for our own. We need to go create our own adventures, create our own things and friendships and relationships. And sometimes that can be hard to do because you put 18 years into like sacrifice and doing everything for them. But I think it is important. And I've seen that in my kids. They're proud of me when I'm doing something and I'm going on a trip, or I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to invest in a friendship or a relationship because they know that that's good for you. And so I think there is a little bit of a shift to think more about, okay, what are the things that God's placed in me? What are the things that God has for me? Because at 50, I'm like, I got a good another 40 years to go here.
Yeah.
I got a lot more life ahead of me. And, when you place kind of your happiness, your joy, your everything on your children, that can feel like a burden to them.
Yeah, and then what does it mean when that season's over that, you know, that was wasted because you've got nothing left to do with your life? But actually think about it in a different way. Like every one of those years that you've been raising a kid, like almost like you've been building a muscle of capacity, resilience, grace, patience. Like think of all the things that not just you've been training in them, but God's been forging in you. And now you have that capacity to show up for this next thing that God has for you. And it's not second best. It's the thing God has for you now that He's prepared, and it's not less than. And so I think like that's how I look at it. I'm like, oh my goodness, like I think I could run like a Fortune 500 company. Like I have managed, I have held it down. I finally learned to admin and dress my kids in the right costumes on the right day. Like I've grown in so many ways. Like now I'm ready to show up for like this next thing. And just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not of value. It's not of worth. It's not like if God prepared it, there's going to be grace for it. There's going to be purpose in it. So
It's
just
good.
for anyone looking down the lens, maybe feeling fear, I think maybe where we're landing right now is the thought of it is sometimes worse.
Yeah.
There is pain in it, and that doesn't mean it's not hard, doesn't mean it's not right. But God has prepared something beautiful for you to do with all of the skills and the things that you've learned and gained in that.
I remember one time in life I was going through this kind of big transition, like a kind of part of our life was closing, and we didn't know what the next thing was going to be. And a friend of mine texted just out of the blue, and he said, "I love transitions." And it was such a good reminder to be like, okay,
this is healthy.
I can look at this in one way and be like, oh, you know, I hate this. This is awful. Like I wasn't ready or whatever. But you could look at it and be like, I love transitions. I'm going to look at this and look for the positive in it and the excitement in it. And that's what, you know, when you send your kids off, there's so much excitement and so much they're going out into the world and they're doing exactly what you've kind of always raised them to do. They're doing what they need to do, what's right. So if you can, you know, reframe it and look at it that way, I think it's helpful.
That's so good. I love that. Well, we're wrapping up now. And just some of the things that when we talked about doing the podcast, we wrote down some words that we were like, we want these women on the other end to be feeling this. Like, what were some of the words? I think there was like seen, loved, chosen.
Yes, like heard, listened to. And I think that's, you know, you guys have had a chance to tell us a little bit of the things that you want us to talk about. So we want more of that. You know, tell us what you want us to talk about. We want you to feel heard and feel like there's things that if there's things that are on your heart, we want to know so we can speak to those things. Yeah,
and also feel encouraged and that you are not alone. Yeah. Like some of these phases that we've been talking about or we will talk about, they can feel very isolating. And am I the only one? And what I love is when we sit down, sometimes you talk about something and like your experience is the polar opposite of mine or our approach is. So we might do things differently, but we might feel the same emotions. Yeah. And so that's our prayer is like you feel seen, you feel part of this and you feel encouraged, but you are not alone in this. So we're going to wrap up with our scripture, kind of a bit of a commission from Matthew 5 verse 14. This is who you are. This is Christ in you. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.